Hey everyone, before we get too far into the video, I do want to mention one thing before we start. As far as these review videos go, I don't know if I mentioned this in my previous video, Gun, but I make these reviews to help out those that are starting to collect or those that are already collecting and they just don't know if they want to get this game or not. And I know that collectors are different. There's some that collect games to play them and keep them and reserve them. And I know there's also those people that collect games and just keep them on a shelf, never play them. They just keep the games for whatever reason. I don't know. But my main purpose of me doing these review videos kind of more so goes towards people that collect games and play them. Those type of collectors, because I just think that if you collect games, you would be more than likely to play them, and I feel like you should want to know what you're getting into before you collect this said game. And with all that out of the way, I mean, I know my opinions are kind of my own, and I don't have nostalgia for some games that other people might, but in that sense, I don't think that entirely matters because I try to look at it through an objective standpoint, and I try to see it through the lens of when this game came out and what was around during that time, and what came out alongside it, or what had come out in the past, and did this game hold up, did it age well, was there something that was better during the time and stuff like that. And with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the video. This is Army Sarge's Heroes for the N64, but there's versions for the PlayStation 1 and Dreamcast, and for the PC at the time, Microsoft Windows. And we're doing the 4-player, well, it's 3-player mode, but you can have up to 4 players for the Dreamcast and the N64 version. You can only have 2 players for the PlayStation 1 and the Microsoft Windows version, which is really weird because you can get the multi-tap for the PlayStation 1, so the reason why you can't play 4 players is kind of unknown to me. I don't know why you wouldn't be able to. But as far as the game is, I'm not going to talk about the campaign, mainly because I feel like the campaigns in a lot of these shooter games, to me, don't really hold up. When you play a campaign, you might get maybe 5 to 20 hours out of it, depending on how long it takes you, how good you are, or if you just try to complete everything, finding all the secrets and whatnot. And there's only certain few games that I've ever played campaigns, intentionally tried to play campaigns for, which is like Doom and Quake, and I'm doing it with Metroid, but Metroid's not an FPS, it's more of a adventure game. My point is I don't think the campaign in this game really makes any worth towards this game. I think the multiplayer is really the thing you would buy this game for, specifically because the campaign I don't think is any longer than maybe 10 to 11 hours, and even then, the gameplay I've seen from this game on its campaign is kind of buggy, or if it's not buggy, it's at least a little bit hard and difficult. But with that all being said, I feel like even whenever that's put on the table, that 11 to 10 hour campaign, once you complete it, it's done, unless you have some sort of reason to go back and play it. I mean, you probably wouldn't. So the only thing left to do is multiplayer, right? So that's why I'm looking into the multiplayer aspect of this game rather than its campaign. And that's really what the review score is going to be based off of at the end. So let's start off with what would happen in the multiplayer when you first start it up. When you first start up multiplayer, you would start with choosing your team. And there's 4 teams that you can pick from, except for if you're playing like on PSP or PlayStation 1 or the Microsoft Windows version. So you can actually have team battles, but I feel like free-for-all is more fun with 4 people. We only had 3. But you would choose your team. You would choose your character model that you would want. You can pick as a lot of different characters, like Sarge or Cadet or Vinny, or just, they're not really all that different. The only main difference really is Vinny. She seems more realistically human than the other characters that are more plastic, toy men. But other than that, you don't really get a big difference, especially even if you change your color. If you change your color, nothing big really happens with the characters either. So there's that, and then you would choose your maps. Now, there I think are 8 maps in total on multiplayer, and as far as the maps go, they are all pretty good as far as size. There are some that are really big, like the kitchen. I think the kitchen is just too big, and it would lead to a really long game, because unless you had a time limit, you wouldn't be able to really end the game quickly. I think it would take a really long time to finish a game on kitchen. But there's other levels like town and base, and I think there's one sandbox or something. No, yeah, sandbox, and then there's like another one that's really small. There's a few small maps. It's kind of like Call of Duty before Call of Duty in a sense. You have your small maps, you have your medium maps, and you have your large maps. And do the maps really save the game? I don't know. I mean, I like the way that they made them aesthetically pleasing, because they actually do some clever things, like in the kitchen or in the bathroom and a few other maps that have water or sinks. The moment you fall in the sink, you actually die. But the thing is, though, is that that's not really... I mean, it's kind of a cheap move, in my opinion, because you don't really lose a life, and you don't really lose points. You don't gain points or lose points from doing it. It's just kind of like, oh, you died, you committed suicide, okay, restart, and that's about what it is. So I like the way that they did that. I think it's kind of quirky. It gives us some, character for the stage or for the maps, but I don't think that really makes the game's maps all too great. There are some hit and miss maps. Some maps kind of look bland, like Island. That one's really just an open area with like maybe a few trees and some hills. Other than that, it's kind of, basic. And then there's also... Sandbox is pretty nifty, but it kind of reminds me of the block fort map on Mario Kart 64, where it's just 4 towers and you drive around. It was funny in Mario Kart because it's just kind of basic. You're not really focused on what the world looks like. You're just trying to get away from your friend's red shells. But in this one, it's just kind of like everything's muddled. It kind of just looks too tall. It just, to me, it just doesn't work well. I like that it's a small map, because then it's more so a hide and seek thing. You just try to find one area of the map that they're on. But with it being that small, it also just kind of makes the verticality of the map kind of stand out. It being just really freakishly tall. And there's like 2 different levels of the map too. Like you can go up to the top where the pillars are, or you can be on the ground. But I mean, the maps, I'd say they're decent. You'd have some fun times on some maps, but on others, I would just say, unless you have 4 people, don't even bother going on them. There are definitely some maps that are more 4-player oriented, and then if you don't have 4 people, I would definitely stick with smaller maps like town and base. That aside, let's get into the actual gameplay. So we'll start off with the guns that you can find and the other items that you can find in the game before we talk about mechanics. And the main gun you'll start with whenever you load up into a game is a standard assault rifle, which, its fire rate isn't bad, but the game's hit stun is kind of, janky. So like you can shoot the assault rifle and actually knock people back a little bit, which kind of prevents them from shooting. It's an alright gun, but it's definitely, it's kind of a high top tier gun actually. But there's other guns in there too, like the shotgun. Shotgun's really powerful up close, about 3 shots and the person's dead. There's also a machine gun, if I'm not mistaken, or it's a SMG. Faster fire rate, doesn't quite go as far, but if you can, find their opponent, you can at least scare them with it and kind of lay in on them. There's a mortar where if you pick up... the mortar and grenades kind of work the same, and I think there's Molotovs, but basically it's more of a... you have to stand where you are, and then aim the little circle that's on the ground where you want your mortar to go, or your grenade or whatever. Mortars can launch in a lot more length, or in a lot more of the area of the map, whereas grenades only have so much of a reach because of how far your character can throw. Or Molotovs. And the other gun, there's sniper rifles and flamethrowers and RPGs. Now the thing is about the mortars, the grenades, and the RPGs, this game's hit detection is really, really janky. Like, you can't... if you shoot an RPG at the ground and there's a player that's standing 2 feet or a foot in what that looks like in the game's like length away from it, no damage. Like those weapons are pretty much not optimal. You wouldn't really use them in the like multiplayer match because you can't really get a guaranteed kill off them, or even damage really for that matter. Like for the RPG, the only real way you can use that is if you just dead on hit them with the RPG rocket and not even worry about blast, because blast really doesn't even affect the character a whole awful lot. Sniper rifle's okay. It's actually really powerful. I think if you get a headshot, it's an instant kill, and then 2 body shots will take him out, and then your flamethrower is top tier. Like, it's probably one of the best weapons in this game because the flamethrower covers such a large distance, and it's also the only gun that causes a certain effect where the only way to like not take damage is to do a certain mechanic in the game, which is stop, drop, and roll. If you don't do that, you're gonna continuously burn to death, and you will actually lose a life really quickly. You have to be really quick with doing this, otherwise it's not going to work. And the thing about the flamethrower is it takes so much space up that you could just spam a flamethrower on somebody, and while they're stop, dropping, or rolling, you could still shoot them with it, and they would still burn to death because it's just so insanely big. If you're ever in an area with the guy that has the flamethrower, you're pretty much just lost your life, unless you can take them out before they take you out. But even then, you'd have to stop, drop, and roll really quickly. And that's about it for the weapons. There are some power-ups, I think, where you can get extra health. There's like a little health box laying around. Like, you can get some health boxes that'll re-heal you, and then there's ammo boxes that'll give you ammo for whatever gun you have. They're scattered around in certain areas where if you know where they are, then you pretty much can be guaranteed to get those boxes every single time. They don't have a random spawn location. They're usually always in the same locations. And that is about it for all items and guns on the map. Now, as far as mechanics wise, this is where we have some big old problems. So this game is a third person shooter, and because of that, you have to look in the general direction of your opponent. Because it's third person, you may think that you're facing your opponent, but whenever you do, your bullets might not actually go towards them, and they might veer off to the left or to the right slightly and not even touch your opponent. But the problem is that its hit detection is really bad. And then we need to talk about the hit stun. So for every gun in this game, there's different hit stuns. Like the Tommy gun, it shoots really fast, but the hit stun's not really that long. Whereas the assault rifle that you start out with, you can continuously shoot somebody with that assault rifle and they would not be able to move, and you can actually easily get a kill off of that. That's why I said earlier that it's a top tier gun, because it's just so easy to get kills off of, because if you can continuously hit shots on someone, the hit stun prevents them from really aiming and shooting at you. And that can cause a lot of problems for certain people in an assault rifle match, and it just kind of makes the game kind of more of a who shoots first, basically, or who gets hurt. Who gets hit first and whatnot. And while that's not entirely bad, I feel like that's kind of poor design, because then it just rewards people being kind of rushed down. I mean, you can camp and you can try to get some little hiding spots going where you can hide and camp and stuff. The thing is, though, is that the map for all the characters is in the center of the screen. So even if you try to camp, they're going to find you eventually, and if they were, smart, or if the people know the map really well, they would know where the certain items are that they can use to get you out of your camping spots, like grenades or maybe a flamethrower or something that would take you out really quickly. So that's kind of my gripe on hit stun. And then another mechanic in this game that's really weird is like I said, the stop, drop, and roll. And it's one of the few mechanics that's used that involves the C buttons on the N64. I think if you were to use the PlayStation, it wouldn't use C button. It would use right analog, if I'm not mistaken. And if it doesn't use right analog, then it might use the left button, D-pad. I mean, and what it is essentially you have to press the down button, the down yellow button on the N64, and then you have to press, I think, right or left, or move right or left with the analog stick. It's just a really janky control that if you didn't know how to do this through like training in the game or just finding it out, it's a really complicated thing to do, and it would take way too much time for you to do it. If you were flamed, like if you got gotten flamethrowered and you were about to die, you would survive. Like you wouldn't, unless you just figured it out after spawning, there's no way you'd be able to survive another encounter. Because that's the only way to actually take out fire or put down flames on your body in the game. And it's just kind of a janky mechanic. And then as far as the other ones go, there's also jumping. Jumping is kind of a death sentence because jumping takes so much time to actually pull off. Like you have a lot of end lag for jumping, and the only reason you would really do it is to advance from one platform to another. There's also strafing, which also requires the C buttons, and the C buttons are kind of... My N64 controllers kind of were sticky at the time, so we had trouble strafing, and I'm sure other people's controllers probably are sticky too. I'm sure there's other people that have probably not taken good care of their N64 controllers. If you have, good, but I still think that strafing is really weird. And strafing doesn't really help either, like with shooting your opponent, because when you're strafing, the direction that your character's looking, it's like put a line right in front of your character. They won't shoot. So if there's somebody that's like 2 feet or 2 inches to the left and I move and strafe right, even though I'm still facing my opponent, it will not shoot him. Like, it just goes straight in front of my character and it will not like auto aim onto your opponent, which is really dumb because strafing is almost the only thing that really helps in the combat with making it not be a like run and gun. But again, I mean, this is an old game and I'm sure they had some limitations, but it still kind of just feels like it's counterintuitive to even strafe, even though that's tactically the best thing you can do because that's what helps you get away from people that are, you know, running and gunning. But it just doesn't help with shooting or counterattacking because you just can't auto aim. And then I think there's one more mechanic. There's the instant drop, which is basically if you press the, because okay, there's 2 ways to count or to fall on the ground. So that way you do the stop, drop, and roll, but you can actually crouch and you can lay down. So whenever you're doing stop, drop, and roll, you can essentially do it going, you know, the long way, which is crouching and then laying down. But you can also fast lay down, I think, if you start running and then press the down button while you're running, and it'll do like a little dolphin dive, or he'll just immediately fall down. I think you have to be running in order to do it, though. Otherwise, you'll go into crouch and then lay down. Yeah, you'll go into crouch or lay down. And that's about it for mechanics. But given everything about the mechanics, I don't think that really helps the game because these mechanics just are so old and they just don't feel fluid enough that I think that's the main thing that really hurts this game. And it's also specifically because this game is third person, like over the shoulder, you know, shooting. There are some guns you can use that are first person, like the sniper rifle has the aim down sight and that becomes first person shooting, but even then that just doesn't feel right in the game. Like in the game it just kind of feels slow and sluggish and it just doesn't feel smooth. So it also becomes counterintuitive to even do that sometimes. And with the maps being so big, you know, you don't know where certain characters can go because there's also teleporters on the map, so you can teleport to anywhere you really need to if you know where the teleporter goes. And there's about 3 maps, 4 I think, that use teleporters. I know the bathroom and the kitchen do, and I think the living room uses teleporters. And there's just so many that are laid about in those maps that teleport you where you need to go, and it kind of screws the game up with, like, if you're sniping, that kind of just messes you up because then you have to do the slow animation of turning, which actually I think the people that are running from you are faster than your scope speed because I don't think you can adjust scope speed. And whenever you're doing that, they can catch up to you and get to you before you even do whenever you shoot them. Although I guess the quick fix to that is to just get aiming down sight and then looking back at or trying to find them and then aim down sight again. But if you had the perfect angle, it kind of just sucks to have to adjust, recalibrate all over again. So my final thoughts on the game, I gave it a 3 out of 10. I think the game fails to stay relevant, and I think it doesn't have a whole lot of unique qualities that a lot of other shooters we have now that are multiplayer based. We got online shooters and we got other better shooters from the past like Quake 2. Quake 2 is a really good N64 game. That's a really fun game. I would rather be playing that than when I played Army Men. And then you've also got Forsaken. And then, for GameCube, we've also got Metroid Prime Hunters 2, or Metroid Prime 2, and then we've got Time Splitters and stuff like that. There's just a bunch of older FPS games that are better. And Doom 2 even, I think, has multiplayer aspects, so you can play Doom 2. But, all that aside, the game itself, if you're just a really nostalgic person wanting to play this game again, have the itch to go back and play Army Men, or you're looking for a game that involves toy soldiers, this is the game for you. Otherwise, if you're a hardcore gamer and you just want to play a good game, I would say steer clear of this game because it's not really going to offer a whole lot that you haven't already seen. And I feel like the controls are pretty archaic now at this day of age. And there's just no real reason to play this game unless it's just for a bet, or you just wanted to see what it's like, or you have friends that are playing it and you guys are just extremely drunk. Anyway, that wraps up this review. This has been Army Men, Sarge's Heroes for the N64. If you like the video, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to see more content like this, please leave a comment so that way we can know what to make for the near future and we know what all of our viewers want to see. I've got some more videos coming up here soon. I'm trying to get things kind of organized and planning some stuff out. But with all that being said, thank you all for sticking around for as long as you have. Thanks for all the support, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.